There's a truth most people are too afraid to admit. The more successful some people become, the emptier they feel. They have money, they have status, they have everything others dream of. Yet when they lie down at the end of the day, they feel like they're losing something far more important than all of it. And the scariest part is, they don't even know what that something is. If you've ever felt like your life is filling up on the outside, but hollowing out on the inside, comment 1. Not to agree with me, but to admit to yourself that it's time to reclaim something you lost a long time ago. There's a moment every adult goes through, yet almost no one dares to admit. The moment you realize you've achieved the things you once dreamed of, and somehow you don't feel any happier. You move faster, work harder, earn more, but inside an emptiness grows quietly, as if something important is leaking out of your life drop by drop. You look at yourself and wonder, why do I still feel incomplete when everyone else thinks I have enough? It's the kind of pain successful people hide well, because it's hard to admit that sometimes we climb very high only to realize we leaned our ladder against the wrong wall. The problem isn't your ambition, it isn't your effort, it isn't your dreams. The real problem is this: we're taught to pursue everything except ourselves. You know how to grow your wealth, but do you still know how to protect the clarity of your mind? You know how to impress others, but have you ever asked, do I impress myself? You know how to earn admiration, but do you still respect who you are when no one is watching? In this fast, noisy world, everyone chases what can be measured: income, titles, followers, validation. But the most important things in life cannot be measured: character, integrity, inner peace. And because they can't be measured, many people lose them without noticing. They start compromising in small ways: a harmless lie, a tiny act that goes against their values, a decision driven by convenience instead of principle. Little by little, they lose something no achievement can buy back: self-respect. Have you ever felt it? That strange feeling where your outer life is rising, but your inner life is sinking? You smile in public, but the smile feels hollow when you look in the mirror. You meet society's standards, but fail your own. You live up to external expectations, but abandon the voice inside you. And eventually that imbalance becomes a quiet crack, one that makes you more anxious the more successful you become, more afraid the more you gain, more empty the more people praise you. That is the deepest problem of our era. We develop everything except character. We know how to build careers, but not how to build ourselves. We're strong facing the world, but weak facing our own reflection. We search for peace outside, while true peace begins in a place most people never return to: their own inner life. Stoicism names this issue with brutal honesty: a lack of virtue, a lack of alignment between thought, word, and action, a lack of personal principles that stay firm even when no one sees, a lack of consistency to remain yourself in a world that changes by the minute. Epictetus said, "No one can harm you more than you harm yourself by betraying your true nature." And many people are hurting themselves this way every day, quietly, unknowingly. Here is the tragedy: you can succeed without virtue, but you can't be happy without it. You can win the world with skill, but you can only keep your peace with honesty, fairness, and integrity. When virtue disappears, every achievement, no matter how shiny, becomes an empty shell, bright on the outside, heavy on the inside. If you've ever felt this, even once, comment 1. If you haven't felt it yet, but want to check yourself before it's too late, comment 0. Because the moment we dare to look at the cracks inside, that is the first moment of healing. Imagine a late night in the city. The skyline is glowing, glass towers catching the light like fragments of an expensive dream. On the top floor of one of those buildings, a man stands silently in front of a window, looking down at the crowded streets below. No one knows that he has just finished a day everyone else would call a brilliant success. He closed a major deal. His boss praised him. His colleagues admired him. By society's standards, today was a victory. But right now, when the noise outside fades into a distant echo, he doesn't feel victorious. He feels tired. Not the kind of tired that lives in the body, a different kind. A tiny crack inside him, quiet enough that only a still mind can hear it. He sees his reflection in the glass. A confident face respected by the entire company. But in his eyes there is something he himself doesn't want to name. Not sadness, not dissatisfaction, but the unsettling sense that he's losing something far more important than all the achievements he's holding. The expensive watch on his wrist glows in the darkness, but that glow can't warm the coldness rising from deep within. The office is spacious, luxurious, filled with things most people can only dream of owning. Yet it lacks the one thing that makes a person feel whole: honesty with oneself. He thinks about the decisions he made this week, the smiles he forced, the yeses he gave even though they went against his nature, the compromises he accepted for advantage, the moments he clearly stepped away from his own values. Small steps, but together they have taken him so far that he barely recognizes himself anymore. Outside the window, the city is still dazzling, but inside him, every light feels like it's fading. This is exactly what the previous part of the story touched on. People can succeed without feeling fulfilled, can win without feeling free, can collect everything they ever wanted and still lose themselves along the way. And in that silent moment, he finally understands something Stoicism warned about thousands of years ago. When you abandon virtue, you lose your soul even as the world applauds you. He remembers what he once believed when he first started: to be fair, to be kind, to do what's right even when it's hard. But as the years passed, as invisible pressures grew, he created small excuses for small compromises: a harmless lie, a convenient wrong, a silence when he knew he should speak. Little by little, he traded inner peace for outer victories. A soft breeze slips through the window frame, making the curtain tremble gently. In that moment, he wonders, if he continues down this path, will anything still belong to him in the end? Or will everything become just a perfect performance he must maintain, so no one sees the emptiness quietly spreading inside? The previous part named the problem: the emptiness that grows when a person trades virtue for achievement. But this scene, this quiet cinematic moment, is where that problem becomes real, visible, undeniable. Anyone can find a piece of themselves in it. And the next part of the story will answer this painful question. How do you step out of this spiral of compromise? How do you return to your true values and build a life that doesn't need to shine, because its essence already does? Standing in that high-rise office, the man finally closes his eyes. Not to rest, but to listen to the voice he has ignored for far too long. A small voice, but powerful enough to show him the truth. His next journey isn't about climbing higher. It's about returning to himself. And that is where the story leads next. The journey of reclaiming virtue, a quality no one can measure, yet the very thing that determines the true quality of a human life. The scariest thing isn't that we do something wrong, it's that we stop realizing something is wrong. Because when a person spends too long walking a path where they constantly trade pieces of themselves away, they eventually get used to the distortion. It becomes normal. It becomes life. And that's exactly why the question, why does virtue matter, is more urgent now than ever. This is no longer a philosophical discussion. This is a matter of survival. Losing virtue isn't losing a moral concept. It's losing the only anchor strong enough to keep your mind from collapsing when the world turns its back on you. Why does this matter? Because without virtue, you can reach every social peak and still never touch inner peace. Success can't fix the feeling you get when you look in the mirror and no longer recognize the person staring back. Admiration from others can't repair the quiet injury you feel when you know you've betrayed your own standards. It's a wound that doesn't bleed, but it drains your soul in ways no doctor can heal. People on the outside may think you have everything, but only you know you're missing the one thing that matters most, your own integrity. In the scene we just witnessed, the man in the high-rise office, the glowing city beneath him, the growing darkness in his heart. Virtue is the final boundary between a meaningful life and a life that's nothing more than a polished surface. Because in that moment, every layer of appearance falls away. Titles can't speak for you. Money can't protect you. Status can't hide what you know too well about yourself. Virtue is the one thing you cannot borrow, cannot buy, cannot fake. If it isn't real, you will feel its absence most painfully in the very moments the world thinks you're shining. This matters because virtue isn't just the foundation of morality. It is the foundation of inner unity. A human being can endure sadness, failure, heartbreak, even great loss. But no one can endure themselves once they stop respecting who they are. Lose virtue, and you lose the place you're supposed to come home to. Your own heart stops being safe. That's why the most successful people are sometimes the most tormented. They have places to go, but nowhere to return to. The world applauds them, but they cannot applaud themselves. And why is this so decisive? Because throughout your entire life, the only person who walks with you from beginning to end is you. Money can disappear, careers can change direction, relationships can shift, but your true reputation in your own eyes cannot be erased. Virtue gives you the right to hold your head high without proving anything to anyone. It gives you the strength to act from principle, not impulse. It becomes the filter that helps you choose what is right even when right brings no reward. It is a compass that never loses its direction, even when everything around you spins. More importantly, virtue is the root of freedom. Not social freedom, but freedom from inner conflict. When you live by your values, you are not afraid of judgment, not afraid of exposure, not afraid of losing what is external. No one can take your virtue away, but once you abandon it, the world can shake you with a single word, a glance, a tiny setback. A person without virtue stands on sinking sand. Even standing still, they continue to sink. That is why virtue matters, not because it makes you good, but because it makes you solid. A person can be talented but not steady, smart but not fair, strong but out of control, rich but stripped of self-respect. And when life tests them, those without virtue fall the fastest because they have nothing inside to hold on to. The previous part painted the picture of emptiness when someone loses their true nature. This part uncovers the deeper truth that emptiness is dangerous because once your inner values collapse, every outer victory becomes fragile. Virtue is what gives the soul its durability. It's the axis that keeps you centered in a chaotic world. It's the bridge that leads to the next part of the journey, how to return to a life rooted in virtue, where each small action becomes a brick that builds long-lasting peace, the kind no force in the world can break. There's a bitter truth everyone learns the hard way when stepping into adulthood. The price of losing yourself is always cheaper than you think, and the price of finding yourself again is always more expensive than you expect. Because real change never begins with strength. It begins with a small, quiet, almost fragile moment. A moment scary enough to make you realize, I cannot keep living like this. It's not an explosion. It's an awakening. Not a thunderstrike, but a whisper inside your mind asking, if I keep living this way, who am I becoming? This moment rarely comes during your biggest wins. It doesn't come in your worst failures either. It comes in silence. When the applause fades, when the laughter softens, when praise no longer warms your heart. You sit alone in a familiar room, but suddenly feel like a stranger in your own life. You look at the things you used to be proud of, and they no longer feel like a foundation. They feel like a shell. That's the moment you realize change is no longer optional. It's necessary. Change begins with facing a painful truth. You've compromised too many times on values you once stood tall for. You stayed silent for convenience when you should have spoken up. You let things slide for benefit when you should have stood firm. You let the world define you instead of defining yourself. The cracks didn't appear overnight, but they never go away on their own. They spread quietly, until one day you realize if you don't stop, everything you built will collapse from within, not from outside. And change? It's never easy. Because the hardest battle you'll ever fight is the battle against your old self, the version of you who knows how to justify, how to delay, how to negotiate with your conscience, how to make every wrong choice sound reasonable. It whispers, just this once. Everyone does it, as long as it works. But deep down, you know every time you listen to that voice, you stray further from the person you want to become. So how does real change begin? It begins when you stop covering the wound and finally look at it. When you admit the small moral failures you ignored. When you admit that what keeps you up at night isn't work. It's the moments you acted against your own conscience. When you admit that your insecurity comes not from the world, but from not being sure who you are anymore. And after admitting it, you do the one thing the weakest people never do. You take responsibility. No blaming the situation, no blaming society, no blaming the pressure. Just you facing you. That is the first step toward virtue and the first step toward freedom. From here, the journey begins to shift. You learn to stay conscious of your own thoughts. When anger rises, you don't act on it immediately. When desire pulls you forward, you step back and question it. When your ego gets hurt, you pause and ask, does this really matter? You begin to understand that the tiny gap between emotion and action is where virtue is born. It's so small most people overlook it, but powerful enough to change an entire life. You also learn to be honest again, not with others, but with yourself. When you want the shortcut, you ask, will this make me respect myself? When you want to lie for convenience, you remember every lie is a cut on your integrity. When you want to impress people, You remind yourself real value never needs to be performed. These small choices, repeated day after day, create a new kind of strength, the kind that doesn't come from wealth or status, but from knowing you are walking the right path. You learn courage, not the flashy kind, but the quiet, daily kind. Courage to apologize when you're wrong. Courage to refuse what violates your values. Courage to say no, even when it costs you something. Courage to stay calm when others try to drag you into their chaos. These are silent victories. No applause, no spotlight, but they build a person who cannot be shaken. Then you begin to live with justice. You treat people based on principles, not emotions. You refuse to use someone even when you could. You refuse to crush someone even if you have the power. You refuse to retaliate even if you have the right. Because virtue isn't what you say, it's what you choose. And justice is often the hardest choice, especially when you're the one in power. But those difficult choices are exactly what form true character. And finally, you learn temperance. One of Stoicism's hardest lessons, not suppressing emotions, but refusing to let emotions drive you. Not killing desire, but refusing to let desire mislead you. Not becoming cold, but knowing where reason draws the line. Temperance keeps you from being dragged by the crowd, keeps you from being dazzled by empty things, keeps you grounded in a world that moves too fast. This change doesn't happen in a day, not even a week. It happens in every moment you choose to return to your values. Every time you choose the right thing over the easy thing, you get closer to your true self. Every time you refuse the fake to protect your integrity, you lay another brick in your inner foundation. Every time you pause before crossing the line of reason, you strengthen who you are. And one day you'll realize you no longer need to prove anything to the world. Your life itself becomes the proof. If you've read this far and feel like you're somewhere on this journey, at the beginning, in the middle, or trying to find your way back, comment 1 to acknowledge to yourself that you're choosing to face the truth. If you're not ready to change yet, if you want to live the same way a little longer to see where it leads, comment 0, not to choose right or wrong, but to be honest about where you stand. Because change begins when you can finally answer one question. Do you want to become the person the world admires or the person you respect? There's something almost no one talks about. Changing yourself doesn't reward you right away. There are no fireworks, no applause, no congratulations. It comes in moments so small, so quiet, that if you aren't paying attention, you'll think nothing is changing at all. But those tiny moments are the foundation of a kind of peace you had never touched before. And the strange thing is, you only notice it once you've walked far enough from the person you used to be. The first sign comes on an ordinary morning. You wake up and your chest feels lighter, not because life suddenly got easier, but because your mind is no longer weighed down by excuses, compromises, or the guilt of acting against your own values. You don't have to track who you lied to, what you sacrificed to please someone, or which part of yourself you abandoned yesterday. It's not happiness. It feels more like finally breathing in your own rhythm. Another moment arrives in a situation where the old you would have exploded, withdrawn, or spiraled into self-destruction. This time, you simply stand still. You watch your emotions rise as if they belong to someone else. You feel the anger come. You see it trying to take the wheel, but you don't hand it the keys anymore. In that instant, you realize you are not building temporary kindness. You're building mental strength, a strength no one can give you except yourself. Then come the quiet moments you used to fear. There was a time when being alone made you uneasy, as if your thoughts were chasing you and forcing you to face everything you avoided. But the more honestly you live, the more silence becomes a refuge. It stops being your enemy. It becomes a companion, proof that you are no longer running from yourself. You can sit with your thoughts without feeling crushed by them. This is the clearest sign of a soul beginning to heal. One day someone compliments you, not for success, not for achievements, but for how you carried yourself. And the surprising part isn't the compliment itself, it's how you receive it. Before, you would cling to praise as a way to fill an inner emptiness. Now you simply smile, not too excited, not too dependent. You realize their approval no longer has the power to control your emotions. If it comes, you're grateful. If it doesn't, you're still steady. This is the freedom Epictetus spoke of, the inner freedom no one can take away. But the deepest change shows up elsewhere. You begin to see the world clearly, not because the world changed, but because you wiped off the dust of ego, fear, insecurity, and the hunger for validation that once clouded your vision. You see other people's pain without judging. You hear negativity without absorbing it. You notice greed, pride, and impulsiveness in others and in yourself. And you smile because now there is distance, a safe distance. That's wisdom, the kind that only comes after quietly correcting yourself over and over again. Then comes the real test, a moment big enough to destroy the old you in seconds, a harsh insult, a betrayal, a sudden crisis, a heartbreaking loss. In the past, you would have collapsed. You would have reacted impulsively, fallen into emotional chaos. But this time, even as your heart hurts, your mind does not lose its center. You don't let pain steer you. You don't let fear tear you away from the values you've been rebuilding. You stand upright in the storm, and that's when you finally understand. Virtue is not some lofty concept. It's soft armor, light, invisible, but so durable that no storm can break it. The deepest realization comes when you look back. You used to believe happiness came from controlling the world, controlling work, people, outcomes. But the more you live by your values, the more you realize peace comes from controlling just one thing, your response. Not because you became passive, but because you finally became active in the one area you truly own. You begin to see the clear boundary between what is yours to carry and what is not. And when that boundary becomes clear, your mind stops struggling. A quietness appears, the kind no night silence can offer. Then you look at all your past versions, the ones who trembled under pressure, who made desperate choices out of fear, who traded integrity for short-term comfort. You don't hate them anymore. You understand them. You see that every mistake was a brick in the foundation of the strength you now carry. You realize that becoming virtuous is not the journey of becoming perfect. It is the journey of becoming true. And then comes a result only those on this path understand. You become simpler, but deeper. You no longer talk too much to prove yourself. You no longer need to perform. You no longer use praise as fuel. You no longer seek the thrill of comparison or victory. Things that once mattered fade. Things you once overlooked become truths. You feel the weight of a promise, the honor in honesty, the power of kindness. Not because society taught you, but because your heart recognizes what is right. And finally, the most profound moment arrives on a very ordinary evening. You sit alone, no music, no phone, no work. You look around your small space and realize one thing. You are no longer afraid of yourself. No running, no emptiness, no mask to maintain. You're not perfect, but you're real. You don't have everything, but you have the one thing that matters most, self-respect. And in that moment, you understand something Marcus Aurelius wrote long before you ever lived it. A straight soul, a clear mind, a pure heart, that is happiness. And you realize true happiness was never out there. It was always inside you. You were just lost for too long to see it. But the most beautiful part isn't that you found peace. It's that from this day forward, no matter what storms life throws at you, you finally have a place to stand. A place deep, real, and unshakably bright inside yourself. There's something interesting that happens when you reach the end of this journey. You realize that virtue isn't some rigid, perfect standard. It's a choice, one you make again and again, every single day. Some days you get it right. Some days you slip. But what truly defines you is the ability to return to yourself, to wake up, to realign, to choose who you want to be even after you've stepped off track. And when you look back, you see that the deepest results in life never came from being perfect. They came from being honest with your own nature. But here's the question that forces all of us to think a little deeper. In today's world, a world built on speed, competition, and constant display, is virtue still an advantage? Or does it make you slower, different, maybe even vulnerable? Some believe that living with principles makes you stronger, more grounded, more resilient. But others argue that in a world full of temptation and contradictions, only the flexible survive. There is no single answer. It depends on what you value more: success at any cost, or a life you can be proud of when you look in the mirror. Do you want to conquer the world, or do you want to conquer yourself? This leads to a much bigger debate. Is virtue still practical in a chaotic age, or is it just a beautiful ideal that no longer fits reality? I want to hear your perspective. In your life, in work, family, relationships, is virtue a source of strength or is it a burden? Do you believe staying true to your values can still take you far? Or do you feel that being honest and upright sometimes makes you pay a heavy price? Share your thoughts below the video. This isn't just a question for you. It's a question for all of us trying to live with integrity in a world full of contradictions.